In this class, we will discuss the solution of the exercise on the activity-based costing system. If we look at the text of the exercise, we have this company, which is the Treasury Group company, that realizes three different products. We have t-shirts, we have shorts, and we have skirts. We have some data about the production of two different months, which are May and June, and we have some data about the overall production process. It is required at the end of the exercise to define the value of the three different products by using an ABC approach. If you want to apply an ABC approach, we need to follow three main steps. First of all, we need to identify the overheads. Overheads are also defined as cost pools because we are grouping together similar indirect resources. Once we have identified these cost pools, so this group of overhead that should be allocated, we need to identify the activities for which the resources are absorbed. In the moment in which we have identified the activities, we can identify the products, and then by calculating the allocation coefficient, we can assign the value of the cost pools to the activities and then the value of the activities to the final products. If we look at our exercise, which are the cost pools that we have? We have the fashion specialist, and we have specifically two different fashion specialists. Then we have 10 technicians, and then we have the overhead that is represented by the energy in this specific example. Our products, as I said, are the t-shirts, the shirts, and then the skirts. And then we need to identify the activities. The activities can be identified by reading the text, and these activities are the paper prototyping, the pattern development, the cutting, and the sewing. In this way, we have approached the overall problem. Now, we need to assign the value of our cost pool among the different activities. Let's start from the first one. We have the cost of the fashion specialists. We know that we have two fashion specialists, and the cost for one is 2,500 euros, but we are employing them for 2 months. So the overall cost for the two fashion specialists is 10,000 euros. Then we have the cost of the 10 technicians, which is 30,000 euros, and then we have the value of the energy that is already provided by the text, which is 5,225. How can we split the value of the fashion specialists between the different activities? By looking at the text. If we look at the text, we can see that one fashion specialist is entirely devoted to the activity of paper prototyping. So we have one fashion specialist entirely devoted to this activity. Then we have that the second one spends the 60% of the time on patterns development, while the remaining 40% of the time on the definition of paper prototyping. So if we share this value between the different activities, we can find 7,000 euros as a cost assigned to the activity of paper prototyping and 3,000 euro as a cost assigned to the activity of pattern development. If we do the same for the technician, the text says that 5 technicians are devoted to the activity of pattern development, 1 technician is in charge of the cutting activity, while 4 technicians are in charge of the sewing activity. Again, if we share the 30,000 euros among the 3 different activities, we can find 15,000 euros, which is the cost of the pattern development, 3,000 euros, which is the cost of the cutting, and then 12,000 euros, which is the cost of the sewing. For what concerns the energy, in the text we can find the percentage of absorption of the energy among the 3 different activities. So we have 60%, 8%, and 32%. If we share these 5,000 euros among the 3 different activities, we can find the portion of the total cost of the energy which is assigned to the 3 different activities. By summing everything, we can find the total cost for each of the 4 activities. So we will have 7,000 euros for the paper prototyping, 21,000 euros 135 for the pattern development, 3,418 for the cutting activity, and finally 13,672 for the sewing activity. At this point, we are in the middle of the exercise. We have the cost of the activity, and we need to share the value of these activities among the 3 different products. How? By identifying an activity driver that is able to explain the relationship between the activity and the final product. Let's start from the activity of paper prototyping. which is that quantity that can explain the relationship between the paper prototyping and the realization of the product. Again, if we look at the text, we can see that the time for the paper prototyping depends on the number of changes that are requested by the customer. So the activity driver is the number of changes, and overall we have 35 changes. The same should be done for the remaining activities. We have that the pattern development requires overall 110 hours, so we can use the number of hours for realizing the 3 products as an activity driver to share the value of these activities among the 3 different products. The same happens with the activity of cutting and sewing. We have the time expressed in minutes for the cutting and the sewing of each of the products, so we can use as an activity driver the number of minutes for the cutting activities and the number of minutes of the sewing activity. Once we have identified the activity driver, we need to share the cost of the activity among the 3 products. Let's start from the activity of paper prototyping. If we divide the cost of the activity, in this case 7,000 euros, by the total number of changes, which is 35, we can find the cost for one change. One change costs 200 euros. If we multiply this k, that is the allocation coefficient, by the number of changes required per each of the products, we can identify the cost of the activity which is assigned to each of these products. So if we multiply 200 euros per change by 15, that is the number of change required for the product of the t-shirt, we can find 3,000 euros, which is the portion of the activity of paper prototyping which is assigned to our t-shirt. Then again, if we multiply this k by 10 changes for both of the products, we can identify the share of the cost of paper prototyping assigned to the remaining 2 products. If this approach is clear, we should repeat this procedure for the remaining 3 activities. So what we will do for the pattern development, exactly the same. We will calculate K as the ratio between the total cost of the pattern development by the total number of hours, 110. We can obtain a value of 192 euro per hours. This is a round value, so you might have different values depending on the number of decimals that you decide to include. Once we have this K, again, you need to multiply the K by the number of minutes that you need in order to realize t-shirt, shorts, and then skirts. This data is provided in table number 2, so we can see that we need 66 hours to realize the t-shirts, we need 25 hours to realize the shorts, and then we need 19 hours in order to realize the skirts. And then we can find the portion of the pattern development which is assigned to our 3 products. Let's move to the activity of cutting, and we are repeating this again. We can calculate K by dividing the total cost of the cutting activities by the overall allocation basis, which is 6,750 minutes, and in this case we have 0.5 euro per minute, which is again our K, that should be multiplied by the number of minutes that we need for the cutting activity, where we can find this number of minutes in table number 3. If you look at the table number 3, you can find 3,000 minutes for the t-shirts, 3,000 minutes for the shorts, and then 750 minutes for the skirts. Let's move now to the sewing activities. Again, we can find a K by dividing the cost of the sewing by the number of minutes, which are reported in table number 4, and then we have 0.804. And if we multiply this value by the total number of minutes for realizing the 3 products, again, we have assigned the value of the sewing activity among the 3 different products. If we sum per each product the values that we have, we can find the overall costs for realizing the 3 different products. So we will have in the end that the realization of 1,500 units of t-shirts costs 22,025 euros. The realization of the shorts costs 14,354 euros, while the realization of the skirts costs 8,846 euros. And this is the application of the ABC in order to define the cost of 3 different products, so by repeating the allocation approach twice.